I wasn't supposed to stop by the cafe that day. Classes were done, my friends had peeled off toward the campus bar, and I told myself I'd just go home. But the silence in my apartment always feels too loud. So, I ended up in the corner booth by the window, same as usual, pretending to study, half watching the condensation on my glass of water slide down in slow lines. She came in about 20 minutes later. Same seat near the counter. Always with her thermos, even though she orders coffee there. She pours half of it into her own cup before adding sugar, like it's some private ritual. Her name was Claire, but I never called her that. To me, she was just Mrs. H, my friend's stepmom. That label was supposed to make her untouchable. I noticed things I shouldn't have. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, though it never stayed. How she read the paper instead of her phone. How she sometimes smiled at something on the page, small, like it wasn't for anyone else to see. She caught me looking once. Just a flick of her eyes over the rim of her cup. I lowered mine fast, pretending to underline a sentence in my textbook I hadn't read. Studying or doodling? She asked when she passed by on her way out. I fumbled with my pen. Bit of both. Her smile was thin, not mocking, just knowing. Then she was gone. That was weeks ago. Since then, I'd started timing my visits without admitting I was timing them. Around 3 in the afternoon, when the cafe was half empty and the light came in low, she'd usually appear. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes not. Sometimes it was just a nod, a glance, the kind of acknowledgement you don't get from most people. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had. I lived in small routines, drafting texts I never sent, staring at the blinking cursor before deleting whole paragraphs, walking home the long way just to pass the bookstore window, knowing she might be inside. Once, I saw her flip through cookbooks, though she never bought one. Today, she stopped at my booth instead of passing me by. "You always order the same thing," she said, nodding toward my untouched coffee. I shrugged. Easier than deciding. "You're too young to already be doing things by default." Her tone wasn't sharp, just tired, like she was speaking to herself as much as me. "I don't mind," I said, though I did. My eyes went to her hands resting lightly on the table edge. She noticed, folded them together, and stepped back. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured, almost like it slipped out. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because her voice was softer than usual, or because the light caught the side of her face and made it hard to look away. "Then why did you let me in?" The words hung there longer than I meant them to. She didn't answer, just gave me that same thin smile, unreadable, before she finally turned and walked toward the door. When I looked back at my phone, a new message blinked on the screen. From an unsaved number, though I already knew it was hers. "Don't stay too late." I stared at it, trying to decide if it was a warning or an invitation. Her message had kept me awake longer than it should have. "Don't stay too late." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, trying to hear the voice behind them. Was it warning? Care? Something else I shouldn't hope for? The next afternoon, I found myself walking slower past her house, though I told myself it was coincidence. The porch light was off, curtains half drawn. I almost kept going, but then the door opened. "You're circling the block like a stray," she said. Not harsh, amused, almost. I froze. "Sorry, I wasn't." She stepped back, holding the door. "If you're going to lurk, you might as well come in." Inside smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something baked hours ago. The house was neat, though not careful. Magazines fanned out on the coffee table, a sweater draped over a chair. "Lived in?" "Tea?" she asked. "Sure." In the kitchen, she moved easily, filling the kettle, brushing a stray crumb off the counter. I sat at the table, hands tucked under my legs like I was back in school, waiting for someone older to decide what to do with me. She slid a mug across to me, chipped at the rim. "Don't burn your tongue." I smiled. "You say that like it already happened. Because you look like the kind who doesn't wait long enough." Her eyes held mine for a second too long before drifting away. She sipped her own tea, blowing across the surface. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just heavy with what neither of us wanted to name. "Were you always this careful?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her mouth curved faintly. No, I used to be reckless. What changed? She set her mug down, the sound soft but decisive. Marriage. Divorce. Age. Pick one. I didn't know what to say. Her voice had dropped at the word divorce, like it carried more weight than the others. You're my son's friend, she added. That alone should make this, whatever this is, out of bounds. I wanted to argue, but the words tangled in my throat. She was right. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Yet the way she tapped her finger against the cup, restless, made me wonder if she felt the same pull. I pictured a dozen futures in that moment. Her shutting the door, me never coming back, or something else entirely. You're quiet, she said, breaking my loop. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. My hand brushed the frame as I stepped outside. She reached past me to adjust the lock, her shoulder grazing mine. Neither of us moved away right away. It was nothing, just a touch. But it stayed burning long after I'd gone. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I stopped by the cafe again, though I told myself I wouldn't. Habit, maybe. Or just weakness. She wasn't there at first. I'd almost left when the bell over the door chimed and she walked in, coat unbuttoned, hair damp from rain. She saw me, hesitated, then came over anyway. Your usual? She asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I nodded. Tried to play it casual, but my pulse was louder than the rain outside. For a while, we just sat. Her fingers traced the edge of her cup. My knee bounced under the table. You shouldn't spend so much time here, she said finally. You either, I muttered. Her mouth twitched, half a smile, half something else. Before I could say more, the door opened again. My friend, her stepson, walked in. My stomach dropped. He didn't see us at first, busy ordering at the counter. She sat straighter, pulling her coat tighter around her. I wanted to move, but she placed her hand flat on the table, the smallest gesture telling me to stay still. He turned then, eyes scanning the room. For a second, they landed on us. Just long enough to matter. You should go, she whispered. I stood too fast, knocking my knee against the table. She didn't flinch, just kept her gaze steady on her cup. Outside, the rain was steady, almost blinding. I walked in it longer than I needed to, my shirt clinging cold against my skin. Later that night, my phone buzzed. A message. Sorry. Didn't expect him today. I stared at it, thumbs hovering, but no reply came. The next time I saw her wasn't at the cafe. It was outside the bookstore, just as she was leaving. You ignored my text, she said. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence says enough. Her voice was low, not angry, just tired again. She shifted the bag on her shoulder, books pressing against the fabric. You could have just told me to stop, I said. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. If that's what I wanted, she trailed off, shaking her head. We ended up walking together, slow, like neither of us wanted to admit it. She asked about school. I asked about her work. Ordinary things, stretched thin by everything unspoken. At her gate, we paused. She held the strap of her bag, knuckles pale. I shoved my hands in my pockets. Thanks for walking me, she said. It's nothing. It isn't. The air between us felt heavier than the rain had. I opened my mouth, closed it again. She did the same. Her hand brushed mine when she shifted the bag. Not an accident. Not quite intentional. For a moment, I thought, but she stepped back, unlocking the gate. Good night, she said, too quickly. The word hung between us, like we'd both bitten down on something too sharp to swallow. We hadn't spoken in days. Not really. A nod at the cafe. A short text, busy today. Enough to remind me I wasn't forgotten, but not enough to know what she meant. I told myself I'd leave it alone. That lasted until I saw her at the park. Sitting on a bench under the sycamore, coat collar turned up, watching kids play in the distance though none of them were hers. I hesitated, then walked over. You're avoiding me, I said. She didn't look at me. Maybe. I sat anyway, a space between us wide enough for air, not enough for comfort. The silence stretched. Leaves shifted overhead, a dry sound. She rubbed her thumb against her palm like something she couldn't shake off. You know he asked me about you, she said finally. Who? My son. Her jaw tightened. He noticed. At the cafe. I swallowed. What did you tell him? That you're just around. Her voice cracked slightly, then steadied. But he isn't stupid. The air felt sharper. My chest tightened in ways I couldn't name. You regret letting me in, I said. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp, then softened. I regret how easy it was. I almost laughed, but it came out thin. That's supposed to make me feel better? She shook her head. I don't know what you want from me. The truth slipped out before I could stop it. To not feel like I'm the only one who can't stop thinking about this. She froze. A small exhale. Her fingers stilled. You shouldn't say things like that. But it's true. Her gaze dropped to the ground, then to her hands folded in her lap. She stayed like that, as if the weight of my words pinned her. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. I'm too old for this, she whispered. No, you're not. Yes, I am. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't joy. It was surrender. And you're too young not to find someone else. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. My fingers dug into my knee instead. You're not just someone else, I said. Her lips parted like she wanted to answer, but no sound came. We sat there, caught in that unbearable pause. The kids' laughter in the distance felt wrong, too bright against the heaviness between us. She finally turned toward me, eyes locked on mine. The space between us felt thinner than ever, like one movement would erase it completely. I can't, she started, then stopped. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me you understand. I didn't answer. I couldn't. And for the first time, I saw her waiting, for me, for something. The question hung there, unspoken but louder than anything either of us had said. The next week, she wasn't at the cafe, or the bookstore, or anywhere I usually found her without trying too hard. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. People get busy. Lives go on. But by the third day, the silence felt deliberate. I walked past her house once, twice. The curtains were closed, porch light off even at dusk. I thought about knocking, but my hand never left my pocket. Then, Saturday morning, I saw her in the market. Not alone. She was with a man. Older, graying at the temples, holding a basket with easy familiarity, as if he'd done it 100 times. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head the way she never did with me. I froze behind the fruit stand, pretending to check apples. My chest hollowed out, though I couldn't call it heartbreak. It was something smaller, duller, like being erased. When she finally saw me, her smile faltered. Just for a second. Then she kept walking. No pause, no explanation. I didn't follow. That night, I drafted a message. Who was he? I deleted it before hitting send. Wrote another. Did I do something wrong? Deleted that too. The phone stayed blank on my desk, its glow dimming in and out like a breath. Days passed. I stopped going to the cafe, stopped walking past her street. It wasn't protest, it was exhaustion. Waiting for someone who wasn't waiting for me back. Still, the smallest things pulled her forward. Passing a woman with her perfume on the sidewalk. A chipped mug in the sink that looked too much like hers. I wanted to push it all down, but memory has a way of replaying itself on loop. Finally, late one night, she called. No greeting, just her voice. That was my ex-husband. The silence after felt endless. I didn't think I owed you an explanation, she added, softer. You don't, I said, though the words scraped on the way out. I didn't want you to see him. Didn't want you to think, she trailed off. Forget it. It doesn't matter. But it did. I almost told her that it mattered too much. That she mattered too much. My throat tightened, words pressing against teeth. Instead, I said nothing. When the line went quiet, she finally whispered, "Good night." The call ended. I sat there with the phone in my hand, screen gone black. I typed a message, short, plain, "I'm not going anywhere." My thumb hovered over send. But the longer I stared, the heavier it felt. I locked the screen instead, slid the phone face down on the desk. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. She opened the door slower than usual, as if she'd been standing behind it, debating. I shouldn't have called you, she said, voice low. Then why did you? Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She stepped back anyway, letting me in. The house felt dimmer than before, curtains half drawn, the faint smell of tea left too long on the stove. She moved around the kitchen without speaking, filling the kettle, her back to me. I keep thinking this will stop if I just ignore it, she said, still facing the counter. Has it? The click of the burner was her only answer. I sat at the table, the same chipped mug waiting near my elbow. My hands rested flat on the wood, trying to stay still. She finally turned, arms folded across her chest. You don't know what you're doing, she said. Maybe not. But I know what I feel. She flinched at the word, just barely, but enough. You're 20, she said. My son's age. I'm not him. Her arms tightened, as if bracing against the truth she didn't want to hear. And I'm not who you think I am, she whispered. I looked at her then, really looked, the faint lines at the edges of her eyes, the tired set of her shoulders. She wasn't untouchable, not in the way I'd made her out to be. She was just human. Then tell me who you are, I said. The kettle began to hiss, sharp in the silence. She didn't move to turn it off. I'm someone who made mistakes, she said. Who stayed in a marriage too long. Who thought starting over at 45 would mean something different than it does. Her eyes finally met mine. And now I'm standing here with you, wishing I were stronger. The words landed heavy. My chest ached, not with triumph, but with something closer to grief. I stood slowly, crossing the space between us. She didn't back away this time, though her fingers gripped the counter like it might anchor her. I'm not asking you to promise anything, I said. I just don't want to keep pretending it isn't there. Her breath caught. For a moment, the world narrowed to that. Just the sound of her pulling in air she wasn't sure she should release. Then she closed her eyes, as if giving in to a storm. When she opened them again, there was no speech, no big gesture. Just her hand, trembling slightly, reaching for mine. Her fingers brushed, then settled. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a declaration. It was smaller, more dangerous for it. She exhaled, barely audible. Okay, that was it. That was enough. It didn't happen all at once. After that night in her kitchen, we didn't suddenly become something easy. There were still days she pulled back, whole weeks when she didn't come to the cafe. I'd sit in the corner with my black coffee, half wondering if I'd imagined her hand in mine. But then she'd show up again. Sometimes at 8:47 sharp, like it was her own ritual. Sometimes later, slipping into the seat across from me with nothing more than a quiet, "You look tired." We stopped talking about what it was, what it meant. Instead, we just lived inside the smaller things. She'd bring a book and slide it across the table when she thought I should read it. I'd remember how she took her tea, no sugar, and place it in front of her before she asked. On Sundays, we started walking. The park bench where she once told me about her son became ours, though we never said that word out loud. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes she'd tell me fragments of her past, like dropping puzzle pieces without expecting me to fit them together. I learned the shape of her life in those silences. The divorce papers shoved in a drawer. The phone call she ignored from her ex. The way she touched the scar on her wrist absent-mindedly when she thought no one noticed. And she learned me, too. The way I always left texts unsent or folded napkins until they tore. How I looped through the same street at night because the walk back to an empty apartment felt shorter that way. Little by little, the pauses between us filled. Not with declarations, not with certainty, just with presence. One afternoon, months later, we found ourselves back at that cafe table. The light through the window was almost the same as that first day. She looked at me over her cup, her hand resting on the table between us. I reached out, casual, unthinking, and set my fingers beside hers. Not grasping, not asking, just there. She glanced down, then back up. Her smile was small, the kind people don't notice unless they're looking closely. Still too young to be ordering the same thing every time, she teased. And you're still too careful with your tea, I said. Her laugh was quiet, but it lingered. In that moment, I realized it wasn't about what we called it, or how it compared to anything else. It was just this: two people, tired of pretending they weren't seen. I don't know if anyone else would understand. But when she reached over and turned my mug so the chip faced away from me, I did.